we've covered a lot of ground, and there's still a point to be covered concerning the, well, basically, holy orders in general in the world today. We've already established that validity is not the only consideration. All right? Because there are certainly valid orders, certainly valid masses we as Catholics are forbidden to assist at. We've established that. Okay, but we should discuss the matter of validity because this one is bandied about. The first claim is that the orders of Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre are invalid because Achille Cardinal Liénart was a high-level 30th degree Freemason prior to his own consecration as bishop. The proposition is that a high-level Freemason, as an avowed enemy of the Church, cannot have valid intention in regard to the reception and administration of the sacraments. It's at least a plausible theory. In fact, some even consider that high level, 30th degree, as an act of apostasy. Although a heretic can have proper sacramental intention, can an apostate who's completely abandoned the faith have it? Okay, that's the proposition. But we have to look at the facts of the case. First of all, was Achille Cardinal Liénart a high-level Freemason? Because it has been established, Archbishop Lefebvre admits, this is my bishop, meaning he consecrated me bishop and then ordained me priest, both. Well, first is, was Liénart a high-level Freemason? All of the claims, you trace them back, come to one source, which, I mean, the first person back in the mid-70s saw it, whatever it was. It was a statement, Liénart is a high-level Freemason, and gives a set of dates. And then someone else quotes that in the article which Archbishop Lefebvre refers to in a conference in Montreal in May of '76, a few days after I was confirmed. This is how come I know that he'd had a bad week that week. So when he got it wrong, saying he saw a picture of Liénart in Freemason regalia, we have to remember he'd had confirmations Saturday and Sunday, a visit from 3 Mexican priests to discuss the election of a pope on Saturday, a meeting on Monday concerning the proclivities of one of his priests, and that's a long story, but I believe it was an all-day affair. In any case, he gets up to Montreal, I believe, on Thursday. It's been one heck of a week. He's working in a second language, English, which is not really one of his better second languages. He has several. Because later on, he abandoned the use of English in public, and even didn't use it a whole lot in private. Like I noticed that in Icon. He would have a translator, although I know he speaks and understands English. The same was true with another meeting of his. In any case, he'd had a hard week. So, the evidence is not sufficient for a canonical court that Liénart is a Mason. Let's say that Liénart was a Mason, and the whole theory is true. At Lefebvre's Episcopal consecration, there are 2 co-consecrators, and they actually co-consecrate. Therefore, they would have supplied for the missing one. Some say, well, you have to be a valid priest to become a valid bishop. That is the opinion of St. Thomas Aquinas. However, presumption must yield to truth. Pope St. Nicholas the Great woke up in the morning as a deacon, was elected pope, and immediately consecrated bishop without intervening priestly ordination. And there are other cases throughout history that are documented of consecration of the bishop without priestly ordination, some of them even without any major orders, maybe only minor orders, perfectly considered valid by the Church. Is Lefebvre a valid archbishop, or valid bishop? There is no reasonable doubt that he is. Okay. So, we can set that one aside. The next one is used against Archbishop Peter Martin Eugen Thuc. That he did some imprudent things, I believe everyone will admit. That he is insane is another question. You can go on the internet. Bishop Neil Webster on his website discusses his contacts with Bishop Thuc, in my opinion, because his appointment as Archbishop is invalid, but everyone knows him as Archbishop Thuc. In any case, in fact, it's Bishop Neil again, not Thuc, but that's another story. And he sees no signs of incompetence and sanity. The bishop was capable of celebrating Mass, etc., etc. Now, some of the videos supporting it, like, I don't like the way they present the case. Well, so I looked at it myself from the evidence I could see from people I talked to. And one of them happens to be a Father Peter Tran Van Quat. Here's quite a story. He met with Bishop Thuc in 1983 in January. Now, he said absolutely no word about insanity. The only thing he said is Thuc offered to consecrate him a bishop. I'm not sure if I buy that story. But I think if Thuc had been insane, I think he would have said something at that point. Because here's a man who could now speak with Thuc in his native language of Vietnamese. Alright? Everyone else would be working in French, which would be a second language for Thuc. And they probably weren't really great at French. And so they would have had communications difficulties. But you talk any of the witnesses, the discussion of insanity is all based upon insane notions from people who never met the man. Now, true, I've never met the man either, so I'm looking to eyewitness testimony. Now, through the testimony of Drs. Hiller and Heller, that's reported in the Sacred and Profane by Bishop Kelly, is not the greatest, and I have seen it from another source, the article, and so it's you know, they didn't pay enough attention, etc. But one has to take a look at the bishops consecrated. I would think if I was getting myself consecrated bishop, I'd know what the essentials were and make sure they were done. I mean, Bishop Gerard de Laurier is said to have written the Ottaviani Intervention. Okay, so I think we can set aside invalidity there. Now, then there's the argument against the Mendez consecration. I think we should just go ahead and set that one aside as well, because what they're trying to do is saying, my orders are better than your orders. Well, as for validity, either it is or it isn't. Okay? And the only thing we'd have to discuss next is legitimacy. And that's the one thing they're claiming, is that because our bishops are, quote, Catholic bishops, Lefebvre, Thuc, de Castelmayer, and Mendez, our bishops are legitimate. Our orders are really better than your orders. But let's take a look at all four of these men. They all four participated in Vatican II. Only one claims to have not signed all the documents of Vatican II, and that's Archbishop Lefebvre. He signed the decree on the liturgy, and I have to go pull out my records on that. That contains heretical statements. It was approved on a vote of, a couple thousand to 4 opposed. Looking at Thuc does not appear to be the kind that would have been opposed. He was rather liberal at Vatican II. Castelmayer could have been one of those 4. I don't know. Mendez, I don't know. But just because you vote against something doesn't mean you don't sign it later. And if you didn't sign it, I think you would have said something eventually. And so, they're all notorious heretics. In certain respects, they're kind of worse than their old Catholic confreres. Because a bishop in 1957 said, there's no difference between us and the Catholic Church, Earl Anglin James. I've got eyewitness testimony under oath to this statement. He said, we should return. Well, before they could get it started, there was a difference. They didn't return. But they accepted the Catholic faith whole and entire. These four men rejected parts of it back into. They may have returned to it. But heresy is sort of like a cesspool. Okay? You can jump in, you can be pushed in, you can fall in. Guaranteed, you're going to come out stinking no matter which. So even as material, they are bishops, they should have known better. They're part of the church teaching. That's why they assemble in council. They should have been looking at stuff real close. In any case, all persons who presume to receive orders from a prelate who has been excommunicated, suspended, or interdicted by a declaratory or condemnatory sentence, or from a notorious apostate, heretic, or schismatic, automatically incur suspension of divinus reserved to the Apostolic See. Okay, let's consider this. Excommunicated, suspended, or interdicted by a declaratory or condemnatory sentence. The only two that would apply to, no, 6, take that back, would be Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, Bishop de Castro-Mayer, Bishop Tissé de Malaret, Bishop Richard William, Bishop de la Galareta, Bishop Bernard Fillet. Okay? Archbishop Lefebvre was suspended in 1976 by Paul VI. That is a declaratory sentence because he ordained without proper dismissorial letters. He ordained contrary to the law. So every ordination of his from 77 on, or even later in 76, okay, the person ordained automatically incurs suspension from a divinus, from divine things, similar to what Lefebvre incurred, reserved to the Apostolic See, in other words, to the Pope. Okay. The balance of the bishops I named were all excommunicated for the June 30, 1988 excommunications, and thus anyone who receives orders from them are suspended ad divinus, from divine things, by the Apostolic See. It is reserved to the Apostolic See. Say, hold it. Also, we should mention Archbishop Thuc, Carmona Zamora Musi, and let's see, Gerard de Laurier were also excommunicated. In their cases, though, they consider the see vacant, so they consider the excommunication vacant. So the declaratory sentence was not used. And since it does not say an ipso facto excommunication, which they did incur for the consecration of bishops, we can consider that in a minute, that doesn't apply to this. It has to be declaratory or condemnatory sentence. We have that in certain cases. Or, so there's another case, from a notorious apostate, heretic, or schismatic. I've just established the four main bishops were notorious apostates, heretics, or schismatics. And thus, this descends to everyone they ordain and consecrate. And say, oh, hold it just a minute. They're in good faith. I shall return to Canon 2372. Any person who has been ordained in good faith by such men forfeits the right to exercise the order thus received until he obtains a dispensation from their prohibition. And this is only for the good order of the church. There are other things, they consecrate bishops without papal mandate. Suspension and excommunication attached to that. Okay, I know all their arguments. The thing is, who can set this straight? This is why the Mass failed. Although the solution was discussed, and I've discussed it myself in the past, we mentioned it in the earlier on. 3 priests discussing an election of a pope in 1976 with Archbishop Lefebvre. Okay, that was the solution. Sedevacantism is incomplete because sedevacantes in. That's a doctrine of the divine and Catholic faith from the only Vatican Council. The solution is called conclavism. We assemble the election of a pope, and we elect a pope, and that's basically what happened in my case in 1990. We won't go into that there, but what we've demonstrated is the Traditionalist movement is not the Catholic Church. Okay? Their masses are not worship acceptable to God, as St. Hippolytus said. I'm not impugning the validity. That's not the question. Is this worship acceptable to God? We have grave doubt. In fact, I'm certain it isn't. But if you take a look at it and you start reading the various things people are saying on that, there's sufficient people reaching the same conclusion I have, independent of me. Okay, they're not relying on my research, and I'm not relying on their research. We've reached the same conclusion independently of each other. One person, in fact, reached it totally independent. I didn't even know she existed until I heard about her pamphlet, Authentic Illusions, Barbara Lineberg. Father Patrick Henry, CMRI, jmjsite.com. Now, he's reached the same conclusion. He may have been aware of some of my information, and certainly would probably be using some of it now. You know, some of my research to back his stuff up. I possibly use some of his research too. I mean, we share, but he reached that conclusion independently of me, because he decided that he was not a. He thought he was not. Thinks he's not a valid priest. I have no question about his validity. He's certainly not a legitimate priest, and he fully admits that. And he ceased functioning as a priest. He left traditionalism before he ever heard of me. Okay. He reaches the conclusion that the traditionalist movement does not have worship acceptable to God. Okay. Read our research. Yeah, true. There are people out there attempting to refute our research. But the only one who can give a definitive decision is a living, breathing Pope. The only one who can settle this question. And according to canon law, every Catholic has a right to appeal for this decision to the Pope. Go right past these men. And in fact, we could go on. They themselves admit that their position is not as solid as it sounds. I won't waste. You've probably got better than an hour invested in watching these videos if you got to the end of this one. I think I will stop here. The other questions I will certainly address in separate videos, books, website, etc. But the Holy Sacrifice of Mass has ceased. It has been restored in very few spots under ourselves as Pope. That's a different story. But it did cease for a time, because there was no worship acceptable to Almighty God. We must admit this and accept the consequences of this. And then, and only then, can we find the solution. May God bless you.